Oh yeah. So welcome back to Cloud DevOps with Lokesh. This is my first live, so maybe this is my first learning also in live. So I'm going to we are going to discuss today about Jenkins intermediate level interview questions. So you see here, I hope you can see the screen. So this is the question: what is a Jenkins file and how it is different from the traditional job configurations. A Jenkins file is a text file that contains the condition of a Jenkins pipeline. It allows you to define the entire CI/CD process as a code, including stages, steps, and conditions. The Jenkins file can be stored in version control along with your source code, providing better traceability and versioning compared to traditional job configurations stored within Jenkins. So, what is the difference between scripted and declarative pipelines in Jenkins? Scripted pipelines in Jenkins use a Groovy based scripting syntax to define CI/CD process, right? They offer more flexibility and fine-grained control over the pipeline flow, but it can be more complex to write and maintain. Declarative pipelines. Declarative pipelines, on other hand, use a simpler and more structured syntax. They provide a predefined structure for pipeline stages and enforce best practices, making them easier to read, understand, and maintain. Okay, so how do you handle Jenkins pipeline failure and retries? In Jenkins pipelines, you can handle failures and retries using error handling and exception handling techniques. For example, if you can use the catch block to catch specific expected exceptions and define appropriate actions such as sending notifications, retrying a failed stage, or making the build as unstable or failed based on certain conditions. So how can you parameterize Jenkins job to make them more flexible? Jenkins allow you to parameterize your jobs, which enables you to provide inputs or options when triggering the job. You can add parameters such as strings, boolean values, choice parameters, or even file uploads. This makes job more flexible and reusable as it can be configured differently each time it is triggered. Explain the concept of distribute Jenkins distributed builds and how they can be set up. Jenkins distributed builds allows you to distribute the execution of jobs across multiple machines, known as Jenkins agents. This enables parallel execution of jobs and improves overall build capacity. To set up distributed builds, you need to configure Jenkins agents and connect them to Jenkins master. Agents can be set up on different physical or virtual machines, and it can be dedicated or shared among multiple projects. So, what are the Jenkins pipeline best practices for efficient and maintainable workflows? Keeping pipeline modular and reusable by using shared libraries and functions. Using proper error handling and notification for failed builds. Following the single responsibility principle and keeping principles focused on the specific task. Utilizing parallel stages agents for faster builds. Using versions control for Jenkins file and regularity reviewing and updating them. Using code liners and static analysis tools to ensure pipeline code quality. So how can you integrate Jenkins with external tools or services? Jenkins provides a wide range of plugins integrate within the various external tools and services. Some common integrations includes like example version control, build tools, test frameworks, artifacts, deployment, notification, integrations, continuous integrations. All these kind of comes under plugins. How can you achieve high availability and scalability using Jenkins setup? Good question, right? To achieve high availability and scalability in Jenkins setup, you can set up a Jenkins master with multiple agents in a distributed configuration. Use load balances to distribute incoming requests across multiple Jenkins masters. Empty employ cloud-based infrastructure to dynamically scale agents based on the demand. Implement Jenkins master slave setups for redundancy. Regularly backup and restore Jenkins data and prevent data loss. These are all actually uh, kind of mid-level questions, okay? And these are actually Jenkins interview question and answers of advanced level. This is for advanced level. So see the question difference. What is a Jenkins pipeline shared library and how do you use it? These kind of questions you will get. Jenkins pipeline shared library allows you to define reusable code and functions that can be shared across multiple pipelines. It enables you to centralize common pipeline logic, promote code reuse, and maintain consistency across projects. To use shared library, you define it in separate repository, configure Jenkins to load the library, and then you use the library functions to Jenkins pipeline. Okay, explain the concept of Jenkins agents, Kubernetes plugin, using Kubernetes plugin. Okay, Jenkins Kubernetes plugin allows you to dynamically provision Jenkins agents and Kubernetes clusters. So agents are created as a pod in the Kubernetes cluster and automatically called up or down based on the workload. Okay, this integration provides better scalability, resource utilization, and isolation for Jenkins build, especially in cloud and containerized environments. Okay, so how can you implement Jenkins pipeline parallelization and what are the considerations? Parallelization in Jenkins pipeline allows you to execute multiple stages or steps concurrently, reducing the overall build time. To implement parallelization, you can use the parallel step in Jenkins pipeline and define multiple branches or stages to execute the parallel. Consideration include ensuring proper synchronization points, managing resources usage, handling dependencies between parallel branches, and monitoring and reporting the process of parallel executions. So what are the Jenkins pipeline stages and how can you control their execution? Good question again. So stages in Jenkins pipelines represent distinct phases of the CI/CD process such as build, test, deploy, and so on. Stages provides a structured way to visualize and control the pipeline flow. You can define the stages using stage and directive in a Jenkins file and configure their execution order. Additionally, you can use excuse me, you can use conditions like when or input parameters to control whether a stage should be executed or skipped based on traffic specific criteria. How do you implement Jenkins pipeline testing and quality gates? So Jenkins pipeline testing involves running various types of tests such as unit test, integration test, and acceptance test as a part of the pipeline. You can integrate testing frameworks and tools into the pipeline and define stages or steps for running test. Quality quality gates can be implemented using conditions thresholds on test results, code coverage, static code analysis, or other metrics. If the defined criteria are not met, the pipeline can be marked as failed or unstable. What is a blue ocean in Jenkins and how does it enhance the user interface? The Blue Ocean is a plugin for the Jenkins that provides a modern, intuitive, and user friendly interface for visualizing and managing Jenkins pipelines. It offers the most streamlined and graphical representation of pipelines with sorry visual editors for creating and modifying pipelines. Blue Ocean enhances the user experience by providing better visualization, easier navigation, and improved pipeline status tracking. How can you secure sensitive information such as credentials in Jenkins pipelines? Good question again. Jenkins provide the credentials plugin to securely manage sensitive information in pipelines. You can store credentials such as username, password, or SSH keys in Jenkins credential store and access them in your pipeline using the appropriate credential bindings. So avoid hand coding or exposing sensitive information in the pipeline script itself and ensure proper access controls are in the place to restrict access to the sensitive credentials. Explain the concept of Jenkins pipeline as code and its benefits. Jenkins pipeline as code refers to defining and managing the Jenkins pipeline configuration and logic as code. Typically using a Jenkins pipeline, the benefit include version control and traceability of pipeline changing, better collaboration and code review process automation of entire CI/CD process, improved reusability and modularity, easier maintenance and troubleshooting, and the ability to leverage software development best practices for the pipeline code. Okay. Jenkins interview questions and answers scenario based. The first scenario is to have a Jenkins pipeline that deploys a web application to multiple environments. Okay, deployment, staging, and production. Each environment requires different deployment configurations. How would you implement this in Jenkins? This is really good question, right? To implement this Jenkins, you can define parameterized pipeline job that takes input parameter for the targeted environment. Based on that, based on the provided environment parameter, you can use conditional statement within the pipeline to execute the corresponding deployment configurations. For example, you can use a switch statement to determine which set of deployment configuration to use for each environment. This is really good scenario, right? Next scenario 2. So you have a Jenkins pipeline that builds and tests your application code. However, the testing process takes a long time to complete, and you want to speed up it by running tests in parallel. How would you achieve this, Jenkins? To set up testing by running test in parallel, you can use the parallel setup Jenkins pipelines. You can split your test into multiple test suites or categories and create separate stages or branches within the parallel set step. Each branch can run a subset of tests concurrently, utilize multiple agents or executor slots. This allows you to distribute the test workload and significantly reduce the overall time, testing time. Okay, so you want to implement an approval process in your Jenkins pipeline before deploying production. The deployment should proceed only if it receives a approval from designated user or team. How can you achieve this, Jenkins? This is another question. So you have a Jenkins pipeline. The triggers builds automatically whenever changes are pushed into Git repository. However, you want to add an additional condition to trigger a build changes are made specific directories within the repository. How would you achieve this, Jenkins? Right? So nice question, right? This will be go after this. So we'll see this after this. Okay. To trigger build only when changes are made to specific directories in Git repository, you can utilize Jenkins Git plugin and the Policium. This concept is really good one. Feature. This is Policium feature is really good. In the job configuration, enable Policium option. So provide schedule periodically. Check for changes additionally. You can specifically directories in including regions, excluded regions. Okay, field in the Git configuration. This way Jenkins will trigger and build only if changes occur within the specified directions. Hmm. Okay, so these are all questions. Lot more questions are there. So scenario based, lot more questions I have actually. See this. So Jenkins pipeline deploys your application multiple environments and you want to automatically roll back for previous deployment. If the current deployment fails, how can you achieve this? This is the answer. We'll discuss all these kind of questions and answers next live. Okay. right? Lot more comments also I mentioned. So what the steps, everything. So shutdown related everything, Jenkins related comments, and these kind of scenario based questions, low level and high level and medium level and beginners. For every question is I have mentioned everything. So let's discuss after in next live. So you will see good experience, you will get more good exposure and good experience by with you this video. Okay, so thank you so much, thanks for watching. We'll see you in next video. Until then, take care, bye bye.